Hey everybody, welcome to the Rochester Real Estate Show. Jason Mancuso with the Anthony Butera team, joined today by Dan Zastowny.
It's happening.
First time, long time.
First time, long time.
How long you been with the team?
Little over 2 years, almost three. Yeah.
Yeah, 3 years. First time doing the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
I guess before we get into this topic of the day of how to craft a competitive offer in today's market, right? Worth kind of diving into the market update to know how competitive you need to be, what that looks like. And I think you tell me what you've been telling people, but my conversation I've been having is, if a year ago at this time there was, just to scale, 10 buyers for every one house is kind of the feel of the market. And frankly, you could probably say a lot more than that, right? But just for scale purposes, right now, maybe there's 6.
Yeah, I would agree in I guess some aspects. I've found that every market is still pretty unique. There are certain areas, certain towns that are still, again, depending on price point and what the house looks like, honestly. Some are still getting 15, 20 offers,
Right.
where others are kind of in more like 2, 3 range. So, I would say, averaging out, it's definitely less than it was last year, but, every house is different, and it's just something gotta kind of keep an open mind and make sure you're ready for whatever.
Yeah. So every case by case, as it always is,
Yep.
right? Tough to issue blanket statements in this industry. We do that a lot, but I mean, at the end of the day, it all boils down to case by case, what's going on with the specifics in the moment. But I guess just by definition, right now, we are still in a seller's market, and a very strong one at that. It's just comparatively speaking, depending on what direction you want to go with that conversation. It's definitely not what it was last year or the year before. But it's still, again, just by definition, we don't have the supply to meet the demand, even with the rates going up and all the factors that are out there in the world. There's still more demand than there is supply.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's definitely still seller's market, and like you said, I think we've just had kind of pent up demand for so long that it's just taken a little while for the supply to catch up to the buyers, and until that happens, we're still going to see this multiple offers and very competitive situations.
The easy way to think about it is just, when the supply is not there to meet the demand, there's likely to be competition with the house that you're going after if you're a buyer. It's just, again, like, okay, even if it was 10 buyers for every one home last year and there's 5 or 6 or 7, whatever you want to say right now, there's still more buyers out there than there are homes for sale.
Oh, absolutely.
And, I think it's important to address that just because, real estate specifically, it's a big factor. It's a big driving force for the overall economic picture, nationally. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of news headlines out there right now. A lot of it driven by the recent increase in interest rates and how that's affecting demand and this and that. And don't get me wrong, there's an effect here locally too. And there's an effect overall, but right now we're still seeing multiple offer situations play out. And if you just read the news headlines and then kind of dive into the market, you'd be scratching your head afterwards. But kind of it makes sense to us where we're at this given moment right now.
Yeah, and I think our specific kind of Monroe County, Rochester market is, there's still a tremendous amount of value in homes to be purchased, even if it is competitive and you're going above the asking price. You're still getting houses for much cheaper than a lot of other people.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot of times as well. I do think there's value just in the concept of we're still significantly below whatever you want to call it, the national average or medium. We're just in that lower price market comparatively speaking to other bigger cities and frankly most of the country, right? Don't get me wrong, there's rural areas throughout the country that are going to be similar price points, if not lower than ours, but for whatever you want to call Rochester, a mid-sized market, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair.
we're definitely on the lower end of the spectrum, comparatively speaking. So,
Yeah, definitely.
Does that make it right or wrong to pay what you have to pay in this market? I don't know. I mean, it can be dangerous to just like compare us to New York City and say, well, we're $1 million under that, so it's got to be good.
Yeah, it's
So.
I mean, it's always difficult to look at, the bigger cities in comparison, but, a lot of times, especially when you look at where rent prices are going now and, like, again, compared to other mid-grade cities, if you will, we still are on that lower price.
Yep.
And, people can get in and stay in that comfort zone for their monthly payment. It's a great thing to do.
Right. So, with that said, and before we dive into, okay, how do you make a strong offer, essentially is the topic today, I think it's worth revisiting like just a base concept of like how you're getting to the point where as a buyer, you're making an offer, period, right? And to me, it's very simple in that you're financially comfortable with the situation that you're about to offer on, and you like the house.
Yeah.
And I hope you love the house. I mean, it's just that word love is powerful. And like, I guess the reason I phrase it that way is just because it's, there's always going to be something that, isn't perfect in the home that you're buying, even the home that you're building.
Yeah.
So it's just like, you can see yourself living there. You can see yourself happy there. You can see yourself, kind of like executing the game plan of why you're buying this house and how long you want to live there. And then it's not going to, get old on you, right?
Yeah.
So
definitely.
once you're at the point, okay, I really like this house. The numbers make sense to me. I'm comfortable there. Now it's leading to this conversation. Okay, here's what we're seeing out there. Here's what's going to make your offer stand out.
Yep.
That's what we wanted to dive into today.
Perfect. So,
Fire away.
First and foremost, like you just mentioned, making sure that you're financially ready and comfortable with what you're getting into. Getting in touch with your mortgage lender, making sure that, you've got that side of things taken care of. I always tell my buyers the pre-approval number isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is that monthly payment. That's something you're going to be making for essentially the next 30 years. So you want to make sure that whatever that number is, you're not going to put yourself into an uncomfortable position.
Yep.
So,
and I'm going to stop you there to re-emphasize the point that we've made before that really is coming to light right now, and that's property taxes.
Yeah.
And the numbers that you're reviewing with your lender in terms of a monthly mortgage payment are based on today's taxes, which is based on today's assessment, which is pretty slim chances of staying the same throughout time, forever, obviously, but more relevant is just whether it's the right advice or not. I give the advice of just assume you're going to get reassessed for what you pay for, and the taxes are going to go up proportionately right away. Now, does that always happen, or does that happen often? I would say no in terms of it happening right away.
Yeah.
But I do think there is a realistic outcome within, say, a 3-year period that a sale, there's a good chance it's going to trigger a reassessment at what you paid or close to it, or, a lot of cases in homes that were purchased a couple of years ago, more now because the market's gone up that much more in theory.
Yeah.
So making sure that you factor that in is huge, because we could be talking, $300, $400, $500, $700 a month in additional property taxes if the property was assessed that low. So this is all like a precursor to making a strong offer, but again, just that emphasis on the financial comfort zone conversation that you have to be digging into as a buyer and as an agent working with a buyer.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess to kind of piggyback on that, it's, again, making sure we find that comfortable number monthly, and then, I always recommend maybe let's err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
So, okay, if you're comfortable with $1,500 a month, maybe we kind of focus on something that's going to put you more like 13, 14, so that, in the future, if things do go up, we've got a little bit of
that buffer.
Yeah, we got a little bit of a buffer. Obviously, we can't predict the future. We don't know exactly when it's going to hit or if it will, but, I'd rather err on the side of caution than have you call me in a little while and say, man, everything just jumped drastically.
I don't know. I'm probably too conservative at times, but I think in worst case scenarios, and these are realistic worst case scenarios that actually have a worst case scenario outcome. I mean, this is how things go wrong here locally, is that if everybody who bought a house in the last 3 years didn't have any clue that their monthly payment could jump $500 and they can't afford that and they're stretching thin to begin with, not good. That's real money, right? $500. I don't, I mean, whatever. To the ultra wealthy, sure, drop in the bucket, but $500 is $500 to most people, and that's a significant amount of cake.
Yeah, I mean, when you look into that, I mean, that's what, $6,000 a year. That's not a cup of coffee. That's something that'll add up pretty quickly. So, again, like you said before, just kind of having that financial conversation and that situation prepped and ready to go when you do want to pull the trigger and look for a new home.
Right. So, went off on a tangent there, but I think it worth noting because there's no point in getting into this conversation of, okay, how do I make the best offer possible when you're not 100% on, I like the house, I want the house, I'm financially comfortable with what we're doing. That's how problems happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
with getting to that point without doing that. So, all right, we're there. We're financially comfortable. Dan, I love this house. I'm good with this budget. What do I got to do to win? Is how a typical conversation kind of goes, right?
Yeah.
With a motivated buyer.
Yeah, it's definitely that question of what do I have to do? What do I have to pay? And to start, I'm a big advocate for an open line of communication with the other side. Making sure that we are taking into consideration any terms, time frame, anything that they're looking for.
Yep.
So that, we can cater whatever we have the opportunity to benefit the sellers and make our offer stand out a little bit. Now, end of the day, the 20+% down, conventional, a lot of cash on hand buyer is always going to look appealing. But the truth is, first time home buyers and stuff, they're not necessarily in that position all the time. So, I like to try to find ways that we can stand out and we can make sure that our offer does get to the top of the pile, without necessarily having those same comforts.
So finding out from the other side, from the seller, from their agent, what's important to the seller is the key to the process. Now, this is something that's evolved over the last couple of years. Because, I mean, think about how this works, right? It used to be in a buyer's market, you didn't really have to do this as much or at all because, here's our offer. You want to work with us? Let's play ball, figure out what's what. Now it's, just assuming you're not going to get a response unless you're competitive and finding out what it's going to take to be competitive if there's anything special at all.
Yep.
Now, where the conversation's evolved is it's just kind of an obvious position of the seller when they have offers to choose from that, they want kind of all of the obvious terms that we're going to dive into today. But finding out, is there a specific closing date? Is the garage and the fridge something that or the fridge in the garage something that they really want to take with them that your buyer doesn't want? And that it's just, I hate to say it this way, but stupid stuff like that could put you over the top.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So finding out any specifics that the seller wants to achieve as part of the deal, and making sure that you adhere to that as much as possible is a key to the process.
Yeah, I mean, having those strong terms that match the seller's wants or needs, that's always the best thing you can do to start up. Like you had mentioned, maybe, the random fridge in the garage or, the workbench or things like that might be a little bit of a pain for them to get out, offering to say, hey, you can leave behind whatever you need to. We're happy to take care of that for you just to make their life a little bit easier. I mean, honestly, some of my buyers in the more competitive situations, we've gotten pretty creative with stuff. We've actually offered to help cover moving costs. So, if the seller's moving out of town, out of state, we said, hey, we'll cover X amount of your moving costs to kind of make that burden a little easier for them. We've offered to clean the new house for them. I had a client whose brother had a landscaping company. We offered lawn mowing for the first season at the new house.
Love it.
Just, kind of little unique things where, if there's 3 or 4 offers that are at a similar price point, how can we stand out and seem a little bit more unique and I guess better in the seller's eyes.
Yep, makes sense. And agree with everything. The one caveat I'll add is making sure you mentioned that line of communication is open. If it were me, I would make sure that I'm having a conversation with the agent so that you can find out like they're going to present it properly and that it makes sense to do this. You know, they're going to see it as value because I do think there is a little bit of a slippery slope, fine line, whatever you want to call it, in terms of trying to do too much to where, you know, whether it's just confusing or just like too much for somebody else to talk about and try to present and having that backfire on you. Like you want to get a feel for who you're working with on the other side to make sure that, you know, anything that you're trying to do to present a win doesn't actually backfire.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it comes back to that communication.
Yep,
exactly. You know, you want to know where they're going, what's the situation, if they're downsizing, if they're going to a bigger house, if they're, you know, if they're moving out of state and they're just looking for top dollar and ease of transaction.
So to the consumer out there, to the buyer that's listening, this falls on us as the agent. This is part of our job to make sure that we're proactive in figuring out what we should be advising you to do. And if you're a buyer who's saying, well, yeah, I want to offer lawn mowing or moving expenses or, you know, pizza delivery, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And we come back to you like, I get it, good intention, nothing wrong with it. Let's leave that out. The reason we're probably telling you that is because we're not really getting a great feel from the other side, and we don't want to have you do anything that is a potential shot in the foot, even when it's like harmless, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to oversell it and kind of put them in an uncomfortable position when they're not looking for any of that sort of thing. So again, you're just making sure that you're aware, and again, the communication with the selling side, but also with your buyers. You know, making sure that you know what they're comfortable doing and what they want to do, and you know, I mean, really how much they love this house, because you know, like you said, it's super important that they know what they're doing, but also that they want this house. You know, sometimes if somebody's thinking about staying for a couple of years, maybe it's, you know, more of an investment. They're not going to look to make these crazy efforts and things to get into it. But, you know, if this is the quote unquote forever house, the long term, you know, they want to put the best foot forward in every way possible.
Right. Yep. So talking terms, talking strong terms. I mean, I think we can, I don't know, we've beaten it to death on this show over the last couple of years, but I mean, here's a recap of like what would be perceived as strong. Obviously the highest number possible, escalation clauses being used. You know, again, back to the agent communication thing, making sure they're going to be okay with that. Okay. Big deposits, showing the seller you got the skin in the game. You're not going to, you know, do anything crazy when there's a lower deposit involved potentially.
Yeah, and with the escalations too, I mean, you know, a lot of times if we're willing to go, you know, 50, 75,000 over asking price, you know, again, to look a little stronger up front, let's not start at the list price. Mm-hmm. Let's go a little bit above that to stand out more, because you know, if we're willing to pay in $10,000 increments, and we know there's 5 other offers on the table, well, you know, there's a 99% chance that list price isn't going to get done.
Yeah.
So let's try and stand out a little bit more that way.
Yep. And that's, you know, you brought up something too in terms of the increment. It used to be kind of a like $500 or $1,000 when these first came out, and we talked about escalations on the last episode actually, was okay. Now it's, I mean, you mentioned
almost the standard.
Yeah, you mentioned 10,000. That's, you know, on the probably more on the extreme end of things, because you're saying I'll beat the next highest offer by 10,000. I want this house.
Yeah.
I'm willing to beat somebody else by 10 grand. That's very strong. But I think point being is it's evolved to where, you know, 2, 3, 5, those types of amounts, you know, are going to get the seller's attention more than $500 or $1,000.
Yeah, because you do want to stand out if, you know, again, if first-time home buyer and maybe you don't have that 20% down, but you got your 5 or 10%, you're still in a good conventional product. You want to make sure that you stand out and you give the seller something to look at. Whereas,
Right.
okay, if it's $1,000 over a potential cash offer, maybe that's not worth it to them just for the ease of cash. But hey, if you're giving them $5,000 more,
Right.
that's not chump change.
Yep. So to fire off some of the terms that have been discussed before, high number, big deposit, waive an inspection, strong lenders, strong, financial lending situation, bigger down payment the better, or cash. There's lending products out there that have guarantees to them. I'm going rapid fire here, but appraisal gap coverage has been a thing recently. Waiving septic inspections has been a thing recently. Just essentially as non-contingent as you can possibly be has been kind of the name of the game for buyers in this market over the last few years. Where are we at right now, today, May 18th, height of a spring market, 2022? What are things looking like right now for the buyers?
I mean, I think you're spot on with that. I mean, with all those terms, you wanna have the ability to put yourself out there in the best way possible. You want to make sure that you are doing everything you can while staying in your comfort zone financially.
And term wise too, that's a thing, right? Being comfortable with the terms that it takes or you're offering.
Yeah,
right?
and a lot of these sellers now, maybe they're looking for some post possession, or they're looking for a little bit of a longer close because they're looking for something new. So just making sure you're telling the buyers, hey, are we good with the longer close? Do we need to get in? Is your lease up? Where do you guys stand with all of that? So it's something. In the current market, yes, like we mentioned before, still a seller-friendly market, still very competitive. We don't know where it's going to end up, 2-3 weeks from now, 6 months from now, end of the year.
2 years from now.
Yeah, but right now, it's, we've got this pent-up demand that just hasn't been filled for a couple of years. So the buyers are getting aggressive, and I applaud them. They're getting very creative. And, they're showing that they want to buy these houses.
All right, so are you telling me nothing has really changed in this conversation if we were to pull the last episode that we've done around how to make a strong offer as a buyer a year ago that we did? Not a whole hell of a lot changed?
I don't think there's been a ton of change. As I mentioned before, there are some markets that maybe we're seeing a little bit of less demand, but I think you put it perfectly before, where maybe last spring it was 10 to 15 buyers for every house. Maybe it's 5 to 10 now. So, I think it has scaled back a little bit.
So less extreme then.
Yeah, but, I think also paired with that is some of those buyers that maybe were out there last year have been saving up cash for the year. So now they're stronger now. So it's just something, making sure that when you get out into the market, you're aware of the situation. You keep in touch with your agent. You let them know where you want to be and what you can do, and then just do the best you can.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I think, one thing that I'm kind of thinking through as we're talking right now is the escalation probably becomes more important than ever, because as a buyer, that at least protects you to not just overshooting the thing by a lot. And I think that was one thing maybe last year at this time that was sort of a thing in terms of like buyers just being like, skip the escalation, go whatever, this crazy number, $100,000 over list price. Tell them we're not messing around. We want it. That's that kind of thing.
In a seller's mind, that's obviously going to be very appealing.
Yeah.
But
like if you're a buyer and you're just like end up being 40 grand higher than the next buyer with an escalation, like.
Yeah,
right.
that's not going to be the best way to put you to sleep at night, knowing you did that. So,
Right.
The escalation really does let you kind of lead with your strongest foot, but also protects you on the backside that you're only going to have to go X amount over the next offer, the next buyer out there. You're not just throwing out, here's, like you said, here's 100,000 over when 50 could have done it.
And I guess the problem, so to speak, with this conversation in terms of, like, if you take a step back and look at everything as a whole, you're looking at the news headlines, you're listening to this, and you're kind of like, why is this still happening? Right? It's all that supply and demand conversation, but more specifically, like, it only takes one other buyer.
Yeah.
And if it's you and one other buyer, 2 offers on a listing, and that other buyer's crazy or getting crazy, shouldn't say
Yeah.
crazy, strong, right? Now you have to be strong, otherwise they're just going to go with that buyer.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, all it takes is one other buyer, and if that buyer's been on the market for a year, and
Yeah.
they know what it takes. They're getting very aggressive. I mean, we tell sellers all the time, all it takes is one good offer. You get two, and you start competing against each other.
Yep.
So it can escalate up there very quickly. So it's just, again, having that conversation up front with the buyers, making sure we know what they're comfortable with and where that top dollar is.
Yeah. So really, like, until the market truly shifts, this is probably going to be a similar conversation in terms of you're not just going to be all of a sudden, fill in a bunch of contingencies to your favor as a buyer just because the interest rate is higher and demand has reduced.
Yeah, no, I don't see that happening.
Right.
In the very soon future,
Right.
if you will. It's just, there's so many buyers out there that are just looking to be homeowners,
Yeah.
and
And it probably plays more to our market because of what we talked earlier in terms of like, we're talking average price point 200 something thousand, not 700,000 in other markets.
yeah,
I mean, it's just like you're able to kind of throw your weight around a little more in this market than you would be in Boston or New York or LA or whatever, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Because of, given the higher interest rates.
Yeah, and a lot of times still, I mean, the buyers, when we look at the monthly cost compared to what they're paying rent wise, it's not a big difference,
Right.
And and
Well,
then
it's part of the problem with this whole market. Rents
Yeah.
have been on the increase too.
rents are going up, and end of the day, once you get into that house, every monthly payment, that's equity building. It's not going into your landlord's pocket, that's going into your equity for the future. So
Yep. So then in theory, till we achieve a balanced market, there's one buyer for every one home on the market. Or I guess until the buyer pool changes their mentality around it to where, okay, still 6 buyers for every one home, but those 6 buyers are not willing to be aggressive, you're going to have to be aggressive.
yeah,
As a buyer, right?
it's basically I mean, being aggressive to do what you can to get that house that you love, while making sure you kind of don't overextend yourself in a sense, so that if those, like we said before, if those taxes do jump up, or if you have some unforeseen expenses, you're not putting every dollar you have into that monthly payment. So
I want to reiterate, and this is like, the example of somebody who, I don't know, poor example. Let's say you've been in a coma for the last 6 years and you just woke up today and listened to this podcast was the first thing you did.
okay,
Which is practical, right?
absolutely.
And you remember the real estate market from 6 years ago.
Trying
and
to
you're
buy
listening to
them,
this,
yeah.
like, what? I got to waive an inspection. I'm covering appraisals. What's an escalation? It's all about what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
That's what matters most. You let us know that we're going to come with, okay, looking like it's not necessarily like, hey, here's what you have to do. Here's what we're seeing right now on May 18th in the real estate market. And here's what other people are doing that you're competing with.
Yep.
So here's how we can position you. If you do this, this, and this, you got to drive the boat in terms of what you want to do as a buyer.
Yeah, and that's, our job is to make sure that we do listen, and we put you in that position to get you hopefully a new home.
I'd rather talk somebody out of doing something they're not comfortable with than like, feeling like it's forced and we had to waive this and waive that and offer this, and a year later they're not happy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something. I mean, this is a big investment. This is not a pair of jeans that you go get a new one next week if it doesn't work out. This is something you got to be comfortable 100% through the process, and that's one of the reasons I think hopefully we'll keep getting some buyers under contract this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think things are, again, market update type of thing. Things are cooling. Demand is waning because of the interest rates. There's, it's more expensive to buy a house now than it was a year ago, and not just because pricing is up.
Yep.
So, that's going to have an effect to sit here and be like, market's exactly the same from a year ago. That's not what we're saying. We are saying, though, like, there's a lot of similarities in terms of what it takes to actually win an offer because of what the competition's doing in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And the buying power has adjusted a little bit with these higher rates.
Right.
People that maybe could do 300,000 last year, maybe they're pulled back to 275 or
Yep.
so.
Yep.
It has controlled that a little bit with that monthly payment. But again, like you said before, until the market balances out a little bit and it's one for one, it's going to be competitive out there. So
Yep, for sure. Good stuff. Anything else?
I think that's about it.
Love it. Good job. Dan Zastowny with the Anthony Butera team at Keller Williams Realty. Jason Mancuso, thanks for tuning in to the Rochester Real Estate Show. We'll check you later.